Bruce and I were together at the same time.
No luck.
Well, she is, yeah, but, her name is Cindy.
We ready? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Lori McCandless. Our president, Kathy Jack, was unable to be here tonight, and she asked if I would lead this seminar. We're taking a step away from our usual seminar where we have the same speaker throughout the evening. So we should have a quick change of pace here as the different members here share some of their favorite things here at the Historical Society. So, Kathy did ask that I present two of her favorite things, and they are USO books. The first one is a scrapbook, and it's full of clippings from when we had the USO here in Grove City. They were based at the Armory during World War II. And then the other is a logbook, and it contains the rank, the name, the branch of service, the home address, and a little comment section about what do you think. And some of the thoughts in there are pretty crazy. These books were given to Joel Bigley by Miss Jean McCoy, who was one of the hostesses at the USO. She gave them to Joel Bigley, and Joel donated them to us. Now, we have USO stands for United Service Organizations, and we had a chapter here to serve the soldiers that were stationed at Grove City College for training, and then there were some that worked at the Cooper Bessemer that learned how to rebuild engines that were in some of the ships. And then they also supported the local soldiers that were inducted into the service. So the clippings in the scrapbook detail the founding of the USO here. And there's articles in there about dances that they held, picnics. They would bring soldiers in from Camp Reynolds up in at Reynolds, and they would have boxing matches on the campus at Grove City College. So they, and then local girls were invited to serve as hostesses there for their different events. And then I found one article in the scrapbook that said they fixed care kits for 21 new soldiers that were being inducted from Grove City. And those kits included toiletries, a sewing kit, stationery, shoelaces, shoe polish, a pen knife, and Band-Aids. And then the logbook, it's real interesting. There's no dates at the beginning, but about halfway through it starts out, it's dated July 10th of 1943, and the last date I found was June 29th of 1944. So some of the comments on here are quite interesting, and I'll pick a few. This guy was he was from Auburn, New York, and he was a poet. Said, "I'll see places, a lot of them too, while serving the red, white, and blue. But wherever I shall roam, this will be the place most like home." So I thought that was cute. And then this one from Memphis, Tennessee, he just simply wrote, "Pretty good for Yankees." I don't think he ever got over the Civil War. And this man from, I don't know that he wrote his location. "Definitely the best USO town I have seen since I've been in the service." And here's one that said, "Nice, but too much, so it's a preacher's paradise." And then this one from Royal Oak, Michigan. "Let's get this damn war over soon." So I thought those would be interesting. They're normally located up in our military room on the second floor, but I'll go ahead and put them on the table in the library if anybody wants to look at them later this evening. So, that's our first one. Skip, you're up next. Do you need help with anything?
And the USO soldiers were housed at Wendell August Forge. The forges all had to shut down during World War II, and Wendell August turned his forge into a dormitory. And he built a mess hall. And it turns out the mess hall was the building just before you got to the old forge that was Red Sturgeon's engineering building, and now it's a duplex that Bobby Breese owns. So that's where they stayed when they were in town. Okay, I have 5 things that I want to show you. When the aluminum room was named in honor of my husband, I decided to donate the 2 things that first got him interested in the old hammered aluminum. I was selling property for Jill Limburg, who was the widow of Bob Limburg and the granddaughter-in-law of Henry Limburg. Now, Henry Limburg was a Carnegie Tech graduate, and he was brought to Grove City by E.J. Fithian to design the original forge and be the first plant manager. So she had these 2 things. This, and Henry was our neighbor, and when E.J. Fithian brought the forge here, he built 4 houses in the 400 block of Oakland Avenue. And you can tell they're the same, although they're positioned differently on the lots. And Henry and Martha lived in one of those houses until they moved on to our block on Woodland Avenue. But this was the piece that we just treasured because it was Henry's humidor. He smoked cigars, and this was his humidor. And then this was just a plate, and my husband loved the simplicity of the pieces. Now when we moved here, we lived just down the road from Wendell August, and at that time you could buy things half price because they didn't have a showroom. We didn't like their things, dumb us. But these 2 pieces really got him interested in the old hammered aluminum. So they are on display downstairs, and I will take them back. This is one of Natil Rossi's first attempts at repoussé work. This is dated from before they moved to Grove City. Now you can tell the age of a piece by the mark on the back. And this has what they call the bar mark. This is the very oldest mark that they put on. And this is a piece that he was experimenting with. He had this idea that he could cut a picture into a piece of steel and then pound the metal into it. And this is one of his first pieces. I still have to use it at another talk, but I am going to donate this to the society. This is an interesting piece. This is an Arthur Armour piece. I was out in Leesburg at one of the schoolhouse shops, and I saw this, and you know, he does gold work and aluminum. I'd never seen a green piece, so it was, I think, $25. I brought it. I came home and I called Arthur Armour. The shop was long closed. I called him and I said, I have a tray, or a little dish, that's green. He said, it's not mine. I said, yes it is. He said, no, I don't like green, I didn't make green. I said, well, it's yours, it's signed on the back. Bring it up. I said, okay, so I took it up. And he said, yep, that's mine. But he told me the story, that in the mid-1950s, his business was lacking and he knew he had to do something if he was going to survive. So he experimented with coloring pieces in black, red, green, and gold. The black was very dull. He didn't like green. And he didn't care for the red, so he went with the gold and then the aluminum. So I have seen pictures of a red piece, this same piece in red. Tom has some pieces in that are black But this is really an unusual piece. I had lost track of this. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. I was down at my grandson's and it's in his china cupboard. I can't donate this because I no longer own it. The last thing that I'm going to donate or show is, well, they have to get it out here.
Do you want it out in front of the table or?
Yes. Okay. We will stand it up.
On the table or just in
No, no,
front?
just leaning against it.
Whoops, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. This is a Jim Myford piece. Now, Jim Myford was a Grove City resident, lived on State Street for years. And then they built a home out on Cranberry Road. But he was head of the art department at Slippery Rock. And he worked in aluminum. There's a big piece of his in front of the Y. There's some pieces on George Junior campus. They're on Slippery Rock campus. And he actually has installations around the world. So I was over in the library one day, and back in a corner, this was leaning against the wall. And I went out to the front and I said to the man at the desk, "Is that a Jim Myford piece?" He said, "Oh, no." And Heather heard me. She was in the office, and she said, "Yes." So I went in and I said, "Where'd it come from?" She said, "Oh, no." I said, "Well, how'd it get here?" She said, "Some man brought it in." I said, "Who was it?" "I don't know." And I said, "What are you going to do with it?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, you know, the Historical Society is featuring aluminum, and that's aluminum. We would love to have it." She said, "Okay." Well, then COVID hit and everything shut down. So it took about a year and a half. And the board finally met, and they gave it to us. So what is it? I called Betty, his widow. She had no idea. But in the process of the conversation, she donated one of his pieces, and it's sitting out in the lobby on top of one of the bookcases. But there is this little booklet with it. And this is signed Myford, 1976. So there's names on it. Larry McCandless, Ernie Wyckoff, Steve Stegerwald, Harrison Weber, Mike Fisher, Joe Couvert, Bob Wise, Ron and June Halavanik. So I thought, I'm going to call these people. So I called Steve and somebody else, and then I called Harrison. I loved his comment. He said, "Skip, I don't remember what I had for breakfast in 1976. So anyway, this is a mystery. Nobody knows who had it. I was thinking about it this week. My guess is these are all members who were part of the JC's organization. And the organization may have given it to their outgoing president. We have some information here in the society about the JC's. If I could track down who the president was in that era, we may be able to find. But we've had it in the newsletter. Nobody knows anything about it. They don't know who owned it, who brought it in. So this is our mystery piece. If you know anything about it, we would like to know. We are going to be refurbishing over the winter, and this is one of the pieces that we are going to highlight and put in a prominent place because it's very heavy and needs to be in a place where it's shown. I have a list of all the places where Jim has installations, and it's a big list. So, you know, his artwork is around the world, and we're very fortunate to have this, even though nobody knows where it came from.
Do we have any pictures of the other artwork? Is there any pictures of them anywhere?
Oh, there's pictures. Oh, sure. Here I have some pictures. These are postcards. This is similar to what's at the Y. Yes, there's pictures. And, you know, I assume there's pictures of the ones at Slippery Rock. But
There's a lot online. If you research him online, there's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So his work is well known, And we're fortunate to have this, so let's move this back here.
Roger, I think you're up next.
That's good, I can get by that. That's no problem.
Over there.
Fell in love with that.
Yes, yeah, I actually bought some after I saw that. His widow has a whole showroom full of stuff, so there's lots of pieces available. Dee and I went out and bought some.
It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. He's
Uh-huh.
a great guy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of you know that I was very involved in girls' basketball in Grove City. At least Dee knows that. I had her daughter for basketball. Anyway, I was the head coach of Grove City for 27 years. And before that, I ran the youth center for several years, and I had a lot of girls' basketball leagues then. And since my retirement in 2007 from basketball, I've been a volunteer coach. I even coached up at the college one time. So as I was walking through the sports room upstairs, I came upon this photo, and it really intrigued me, and I began then doing some research. So this is a 1925 picture of the Grove City High School girls basketball team. So it just intrigues me that it's 100 years ago, and just that alone.
Yeah.
So it made me want to do some research, and I'll pass it around later maybe if you want to see. But it's quite interesting to me. It made me want to do a little bit of research, so I used our yearbooks in the Historical Society. I found out that girls basketball started, high school basketball started in Grove City in 1923. There were teams in 1923, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. And that stopped, no more after that for a long time. Why? I haven't found it, but I would assume maybe the Depression. Pretty hard to fund girls basketball then. In any case, it was gone for about 30-some years. It started again in 1965. It was right before I started teaching at the high school. But it was played according to the old rules. And some of those rules were these. There were 6-player teams instead of 5-player teams. And you could never have more than 4 girls on the same team on the same side of the court at the same time. So you'd have a couple girls that were good scorers, played on the offense, a couple girls could play defense on the other end of the court, and 2 girls could go from side to side. So that made it a little bit difficult, I'm sure. What made it even more difficult, in my mind, was that the girls could only dribble 2 times and had to pass. 2 times and had to pass. So I can't imagine the pace of the game when I started coaching. And why was that the rules? Especially since it's a female audience, I assume because if I was too strenuous for the girls. The boys up and down the court, the girls couldn't run up and down the court, 2 dribbles enough, catch your breath. So I find that kind of amusing when I think about the amount of running I had girls do in the 80s and 90s and the pressing and what have you, that only 20 years earlier they couldn't run up and down the court. So I was glad I did that research. I also found out that then in 1968, they changed locally, well, nationally, I guess, to the 5-player teams. That was the biggest change. Girls basketball has been filled with changes. 2 of the changes that occurred when I was coaching during my era were in what was I going to say? Oh, I know. When I first started coaching, I even told the boys coach this just a couple hours ago. We started in the fall. We played in the fall. We would start our season, the varsity season, like August 25th. And our season would end November 1st or so. And then we had to sit out for 3 months while the rest of the state was playing. And then we had 2 weeks to get ready, and we entered the playoffs. So that was kind of a big disadvantage. Why? Again, I think you'd be interested since a female audience here, because the boys had a varsity team and a JV team, and 9th grade team, and an 8th grade team, and a 7th grade team, and an elementary program. There was no gym space available for girls. So we won't let them play in the winter. We'll have them play in the fall when the gyms are plentiful. I knew it worked, but eventually they saw it was kind of silly to have their team stopping their season with a nice record, sitting out 3 whole months, and then playing a playoff game. And the other change that took place in my era was the reduction of the size of the ball. And that was really a positive. When the girls' ball is about 2 ounces lighter, I think, and an inch smaller in circumference than the boys' ball. And that doesn't seem like much. But if I brought down a boys' ball and a girls' basketball and had you handle them both, and then I put a blindfold on you and gave you one of them, you know the difference. So it doesn't seem like much, but it's made the girls' game that much better. They can handle it better, they can shoot it better, and overall it's become very good for the girls' game. But I think the biggest change of all, when I think of all the changes, the biggest change, I think, has been the uniforms. When I think of the teams I had, and I coached 27 years, about every 4 or 5 years we would change uniforms. And it was always a big day when the uniforms came in, and I would get the team assembled and open one of the boxes kind of secretly and give the uniform to one of the girls, and they would go into the locker room and then come back out and model it. And everybody's, oh, I can't believe those are the uniforms. But I was just thinking, what if one year I would have snuck some of these uniforms? In 1999, have Beth Lewis come out in one of those and say, okay guys, this is our team this year. So I'm really glad I saw this photo. It's made me appreciate the changes over the years. And I even saw a couple girls in here that look like some of the girls I've had from time to time. So I'm going to I'll just leave it on.
You can pass it around if you want.
Well, that's okay. I'll leave it on and you can take a look.
Is that from 1925?
That's 1925, sir.
Okay, I'll point somebody out in there.
Oh my gosh. This historical society is great. Learn so much.
Yeah.
Honestly.
mother.
No. No, sir.
No.
Oh my.
Because she's my neighbor.
Unbelievable.
Go ahead and pass that around.
Now you can pass it around.
Goodness.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my God.
You can pass it around.
Oh, my God.
That
That's something.
is even more surprising.
Thank you, Roger. Marty, we're
Oh, that's-
ready for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where would you like? Right here beside the table?
Hi, this evening, I hope I get through this. My best friend died, Darlene Shaner. And she was in the society from the very beginning up until, I don't know, I think 14 or 15, and she had a back operation and never was really able to come back and do what she did. But she did a lot for the society. She got me involved, and I think in '02, and we went in front of Langley's and sold pencils for 25 cents a piece. I mean, we did not have any money here. We really didn't, and we were just out selling whatever we could. And that's how she got me involved. And I think she twisted my arm. But she was very active and did a lot of things. Now, she was in charge of the hotel room. When we designated the rooms upstairs, we wanted to have a hotel room. And so she took that over. And she was very handy with the sewing machine and just ideas. So she took this towel, and I don't know what you call that, whether that's tatting or not, I don't know, embroidery. And then she cut out these letters and sewed it on there for the Travelers Hotel. So that it, it was personal. It showed more personality. And then also, she made some letterheads for the room. And that's what's up there now. I think there's probably about a half dozen. And it said Travelers Hotel, room $1.50 and up. And our telephone number was 109. Yeah, so she did that for the hotel room. Now we have added quite a bit as we've been getting sessions in. And she and Tom went out to Hallville, and some family was giving the bedroom suite. So we got that double bed. I doubt very much when the hotel was in service that they had double beds, but we were able to get this old double bed and two and bed tables, yes. And that was a big thing. That was really good. Then, up here you can see a sign, museum shop. And in the lobby, there's one for genealogy library. Darlene went out and bought a mirror. Well, I don't think we had Walmart back then. And she took them home.
Jamesway.
That could be, yes, Jamesway. So she took them home and she designed it and got the letters and then put the letters on and then painted over and painted the decorations around the edge. And the genealogy, if you'll take a look when you go out and for cookies and something to drink, it's a little different. But you know, she had ideas like that. I'm not crafty at all, and she can look at something. She could look at something. And then for the kitchen, she thought Grandma needed a high chair for the grandchildren that would come. So she painted this, put the decal on, and made this little seat here. And had it so that we could, let's see, that's, woof woof. And I would not be a bit surprised that this wasn't one of her daughters. And then she got the bowl and the cup too. And so we do have 2 of these out in the kitchen right now, but this is the one that Darlene did. So she was very, very interested in the society. And that's it.
What a nice tribute.
Yes, very nice.
I'll just leave her
I
picture
think
out
it
right
can,
there.
this can all stay right here, I think. I'm
Can
gonna
it?
put this on the
Okay.
way. We can walk around it.
Yeah.
And then John Horn is next.
Thank you all for coming. What I want to talk about is,
Excuse me, John, I should have taken
it's
that off.
okay. Cooper Bessemer. The company is dear to my heart because I have worked for them now for 61 years. We always referred to this internally as the Flying Jackass. But this, we've got 2 or 3 of these up in the industrial room, but plaques like this were mounted on the side of every engine and compressor that we shipped out of here. And it was basically, for a long time, this was the corporate logo. I did a little research here. It's on the front of this, which was published by the Cool Spring Museum. And it has a picture in here. Of course, Cooper Bessemer was founded or merged in 1929. And this is a picture of a plaque from one of the early 1930s engines. And you can see it's got the Flying Jackass emblem. It's slightly different because it doesn't have the 1833 in it, but it's basically the same design. So obviously, I don't know who designed it, but obviously it was designed very early in the corporation. And as I say, it was the corporate logo for a long time. Now, in about someplace in the middle 70s, they decided to modernize, and they went to the CB emblem for the corporate logo. But, and this is a copy of the Recip Update, the newsletter from 1997, that has the Cooper Industries logo over here, but it's still got the Flying Jackasses. So it's hanging on. And this was the last casting out of the foundry in February 18th of 2000, just when they closed things down. And the logo is still there. So like I say, it has hung on over the years. So,
Any idea why they called it the Flying Jackass?
well, it's got the two horse heads, which I think were supposed to emblemize horsepower, I think. But it's got wings, so.
Skip, tell them what else we have of that logo.
Oh yeah, we've got several upstairs. We've
No,
got
this
big
is-
ones.
A great big one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh.
That probably
Yes.
came off the front of the building down here.
It was
Oh,
in, yeah.
that, a man from Ohio brought over, you're talking about the painting? He got one off a building in
Yeah.
Mount Vernon,
Right,
and he brought it over. Is that what the one you
Well,
mean?
it's a big
yeah.
logo like that,
Yes.
Yeah,
and it
right.
was in the yard up there.
It was in the hog yard,
Yeah,
and Tom Noon agreed to have it in the hog yard. It was huge.
yeah, right.
And a mini tornado came up the street and destroyed it. And it really was just, there was nothing that could be done about it. He had seen it on a building and he took it down and brought it over. He also brought this aerial view of Cooper at the same time. And it was a loss because
Mhm,
it
yeah.
was American art,
Yeah,
folk art.
right.
So, yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Mary Ann Collins.
You're hiding back here.
Yeah, I'll get out of the way.
You're fine.
Aren't we learning a lot? I know I am anyway. Now, I'm sure you're quite certain about what I'm gonna talk to you about. But, ladies, I put these on, and I say to you, how would you like to wait tables and clean dirty dishes and have to wear them? Would you like that? I don't know that my mother did either, but,
Are we back to that now?
you know, that could be because of COVID. I hadn't thought of that. I was just thinking about the constraints of handling the trays when you pick up the food off the table. Needless to say, I said I would do something tonight. It's important, I think, if you're going to talk about something, that it be something that's near and dear to your heart, and something that you're going to share for a show and tell. Mine has to do with the fact that I shared my mom with the Pengrove Hotel for 35 years. And I ended up becoming part and parcel of that. So a couple of years ago, when they asked me if I would manage the business room upstairs, I was particularly tickled about that because there is a lot of memorabilia related to the Pengrove Hotel. Many people sitting here probably know as much or more than I do about it, but I am going to review a little bit of the facts that I've enjoyed finding out, that it just makes it part of a special memory to me. Now, transport yourself back to 1922. The movers and shakers in this town, the Mr. Harshaw, Mr. Fillion, and a bunch of others, they decided they were going to incorporate and come up, they were going to build a hotel. There basically was nothing between, in their opinion, nothing of fine quality upper end between Pittsburgh and Erie. So you have to stop and think industrially of what was happening at that time. You had Bessemer Gas engine flourishing, Montgomery Broom, gosh, it says here Lawrence Foundry, Grove City Brass and Bronze, try saying that.
and the United States government had an experimental creamery in Grove City. So therefore, there were US government officials coming to town, there were industries entertaining clients and sales forces that were going around, and they really didn't have a fine hotel in which to house them. But how were they gonna do this? So these movers and these shakers decided that they would have a community project. And I refer a lot to a little brochure that was a marketing brochure for them at the time, and I'm sure they sent it out far and wide. But it basically said that they needed a community project for the comfort, the safety, and the convenience of a traveler. So how did they finance it? They financed it by selling stocks and bonds. It was a community project. That's not unusual. The Shenango Inn in Sharon was done the same way. And I'm sure many other types of projects like that developed in the early 1900s. So first they needed a place before they could even sell the community on the idea. So this picture that I have upstairs shows a wooded area. Now if you think of that block where the Penn Grove sits today, and all of the area behind it that we call the Cooper parking lot, that was a park. That was the first park in Grove City. We didn't have Memorial Park, we had Carruthers Park. And Carruthers Park had a swimming pool. So what better place to have a hotel but nearby a swimming pool with a lot of beautiful trees and paths that their guests could walk on, meander on, if the wives came with the husbands or whatever. I'm building a story here that I don't know is absolutely factual. But I do know it was Carruthers Park, and there was a swimming pool. And I just never would have thought there was a swimming pool there, but of course it was pre-Memorial Park. So they sold the stocks and the bonds. They had, I believe it was $99,000 tied up in stocks, and the stock certificates were $100 certificates, which you could pass around if you want. We have a copy of one. And the bonding, they had $122,000 tied up in funding in the bonds that they sold. They paid interest every year until 1933. And after 1933, they paid no more interest, but nobody seemed to care because they had a flourishing hotel in the town, and that was the point of it all. Construction of the hotel was highly unusual. They touted in this brochure and several other of the resources that were available that it was fireproof. It required no fire escapes. They claimed, because it was totally built of cement.
Yeah.
It basically is a cement built frame with a cement floor, terrazzo covered cement floors, and they just didn't have a fire, they didn't need a fire escape. But what they did have, it says here, this fireproof construction allowed them to have a concrete frame, modern plumbing, electrical dishwashing, steam heat, refrigeration and ice making system, the newest of elevators. So by 1924, they opened a 5-story hotel, and they were ready to go. The brochure goes on to define it as having all the refinement and gentility, get that one, of a large city hotel or resort, but none of the immoral distractions. What that means, you see, is it was against the law in 1924 to have any kind of sporting activities or, I believe they called it, organized sports or amusements permitted on Sundays. So they used that as a basis for being able to say in their brochure that, that it was deemed to be an indication of the character of the community. Now, how many times now do we hear in our churches that sports get in the way of so much? I just throw that out there. Plus Grove City at that time was a prohibitionist community.
Yeah, that was Dr. Fithian.
Dr. Fithian had come to town in 1900. He was a strong prohibitionist, and in those years up to 1934, he ran on the Prohibition Party for, like, to be a senator, a state treasurer, an elector to a presidential election, and he didn't win any of them. Or no, win governor, she's right, he
Right,
ran
yeah.
for governor
Right.
also, yeah. So they opened with 64 rooms, a banquet hall, a laundry, a dining room, a sunroom, porters to carry your bags, and get this, a roof garden. There was a garden on the roof of the banquet hall.
Yeah.
That amazed me. I mean, just a little bit early for its time. But it became the social center of Grove City. In our memorabilia that's in the file is a little program from the Beta Sigma Spring Formal in 1933. And I want to prove to you that it's absolutely true when we learned that those girls back then had dance cards. That you took this to the formal and the gentleman would write down, they would write down who you were going to dance with each time through the evening. I think it's kind of neat myself. There must have been a Fox Club because they had an April Fool's dance. About the late 40s, that would have been when my mom started to work part-time, just part-time. Because she also did ironing at home, and I was a kid at home, and you didn't leave your kids home alone. So that was part-time. Basically, they flourished. They really flourished through till up maybe the Depression, through the 40s when the war was going on, and everything took a hit. But in the early 50s, this corporation that ran the board, that ran the hotel, they hired Francis, they hired Francis Whitman. And Mr. Whitman became the manager in absentia because he owned the Silver Mine Tavern in Norwalk, Connecticut. But they felt that he could bring back the splendor of the hotel. And I think he did. I think it was about that time that they wanted to restore this. He hired Elaine Pompa as the local manager. Lee Hilger, who lived there long after his retirement, to run the desk and handle all the reservations. Basically, Della Smith, if you remember that name, Della was the master chef in a sense. She ran the kitchen and the bakery. And she produced the best sweet rolls in western Pennsylvania. She did. One time when the William Penn Hotel, what's now the Omni William Penn, something happened, I don't even remember, I just remember the story. They were down, their bakery wasn't able to do what it did. She shipped, they sent a truck up. She produced dozens and dozens of sweet rolls so they could have them in their dining room. But they were wonderful. They came out to you either on a tray or in her cloverleaf rolls and such came out in little cups. Basically at that time in the 50s when Mr. Whitman was running the show, Mom worked full-time then. But still I wasn't allowed to stay home alone. So if I had to be home alone, that meant I had to go to work with her. And I would sit there and they'd put me in a corner and I would fold napkins, clean the salt and pepper shakers or load the sugar bowls, anything to keep Mary Ann busy. So she couldn't run the streets of Grove City. Under Mr. Whitman's charge, his goal or his thought pattern to restore that gentility, well, let's make it like a restaurant that you would find in Savannah, Georgia. So my mom had a long dress, to the floor skirt, and she wore the white gloves. And they worked 3 shifts a day. She would go at 7:30 to serve breakfast, not just she, other wait staff. She would go at 7:30, work till 9:30 or shortly thereafter, come home, go back to work at 11 for the lunch crowd, come home at 2:30, go back to work at 4:30, and work till 8:30, or 8. She had one day off a week, that was Saturday. She was like the oldest one there, so she said to Elaine Papa, I will have Saturday off. So what did she do on Saturday? We had to drive to Ohio to take care of my grandma and grandpa for the day so that our younger sister could have a day off. So that was her way of having a day off. And if I wanted to see anybody I was dating, they had to drive all the way to my grandmother's to get me. And they did. My husband did. Strange family, I guess I come from. That went on. Oh, by the way, I had a couple of menus upstairs. You know, if you wanted filet mignon, you could pay $3.90. And there's the Thanksgiving menu. We'll start down this side. We're very fortunate to have a lot of the memorabilia that we do have upstairs. By the late 60s, Mr. Whitman went by the wayside. In the early 60s, they went back to white uniforms and starched aprons. But the crowd that they garnered were the people that were coming, besides those business people and the service organizations in town. They were people who would come from Pittsburgh to go to Conneaut Lake or the Lake Erie area on the weekend. They would drive north, stop Friday night for the seafood buffet, go to where they were going, and on the way home Sunday, you stopped for the Sunday buffet before you went home. And they even got my dad involved. My dad was a gardener, and he grew large beefsteak tomatoes. So they would give their order to my mother on Friday night at the seafood buffet, and then on Sunday afternoon, Dad had to bring these bags of tomatoes down to the hotel because the Luterbuehls were going to get their tomatoes, or the Shermans, or the Hamiltons, and they had to have their tomatoes. Such as it is. Thank you for your time. I'm fascinated because Mom gave 35 years there, and I shared her with the Pengrove.
You know, we have the original plans for the Pengrove upstairs.
Bill asked me that if the original plans were anywhere. They're here.
we have.
They're here. They're probably in that room, and I just haven't found them.
They're in the storage room, I think.
Oh, okay.
And when did the Shannons take over, do you know?
Exactly, no. But I think it probably was in the 70s.
Okay.
First, it was the Teisches, the lady who owned the diner. What's it called, up by the Guthrie Theater?
Dad's.
Dad's Diner.
Oh.
She originally, she bought it from the, I guess, from the community organization board. And then Shannon's bought it from her.
Okay.
She didn't run it very long. She admitted she didn't really understand how to do it.
Because Mrs. Shannon's son Stuart owns it now. And Stuart and I graduated from Mercer High School together. And we had one of our class reunions there early on.
I wanted to know about more recent history, so I Googled Pengrove Hotel, Grove City, Pennsylvania history to see if there was anything more than what I already had put together. And all I could get was a Dun & Bradstreet report that told me it was a location for senior living, senior retirement living. And it did list in that Dun & Bradstreet report some of the names of the people who were the early residents when Shannon's turned it into a retirement home. And they were the same, and I mean this with all due respect, they were names that you would recognize as part of the fabric of this town. They retired there. In their families would have been a banking history or something else. There is a little Christmas card also that they probably used for marketing. Joe Dilley was the manager at the time, and he probably sent his Christmas card out to prior you know, people, clients who would come through.
I was past there today, and their old sign is still up, and it says fine dining, but dining is spelled wrong.
I got in trouble for that. I was an English major in college, so thinking I knew everything, I tried to tell them that once. Didn't go down very well. It still says dinning.
I had my 8th grade graduation party there, and my brother had his wedding reception there.
I had my wedding reception there too, and I will stick this little comment in. I come from what I thought was 100% Italian background. Ancestry.com told me that I'm only 43% Italian. The rest of it is everybody who conquered Europe. But I had my wedding reception there too. And so Elaine wanted to do something very nice for my mom, and it was beautiful. But my mother would not allow her to do the cooking of the main food. They could do the salads, they could do the beverages, they could do the vegetables, but oh no, she had to do the chicken. It's all part of the fabric of the town.
Thanks, Mary Ann.
You're welcome.
Gary, you're up. Gary Forsyth.
Several times tonight, we've heard the name Dr. Fithian, the Bessemer Gas Engine Company. And about 10 years ago, I was upstairs looking through some stuff, and I found this. It was a little leather book, and I picked it up and started looking through it, and it was trucks, the Bessemer Motor Truck Company. I'll just show you a few pictures. I didn't bring the leather one down. It's getting a little folded and a little bad. So Lori had copied some of these. We were in correspondence. She was in correspondence with some people that she wanted to send some copies to. So I'll lay this up front. You can look at that later. But the Bessemer Gas Engine Company was started again by Dr. Fithian. And it really wasn't connected to the Bessemer Gas Engine Company.
Right.
He was. It was organized somewhere between 1910 and 1911 by Dr. Fithian and an Irad M. Lewis. I hadn't heard of him. And Mr. Lewis was the president, and Fithian was the chairman of the board. They needed to raise money, so they sold stock. They raised money they needed to build a manufacturing plant. And they built one in Grove City. They bought 11 acres of land along the railroad tracks on East Pine Street. And that's the building still that's up there on East Pine Street by the railroad tracks. It's still standing there. Cooper Bessemer, after they went out of company, the Bessemer, it wasn't Cooper Bessemer yet, the Bessemer Gas Engine Company was started in the late 1890s, about 1898 I think it was, and John mentioned there was a Cooper over near Mount Vernon, Ohio, who was doing about the same thing as the Bessemer Company was, making the same kind of engines, and they merged in 1929, I think is what you said.
Right.
So before that, it was just the Bessemer. And so I think when the Bessemer Motor Truck Company didn't need the building anymore, they sold it to the Bessemer, later the Cooper Bessemer. And then the college bought it later on. At one time, the Bessemer used it, that's where they stored their pattern. It was a pattern shop, and they stored their patterns over there. And then the Grove City College bought it, and they store things over in there. One of the things is the company was growing, and they knew from the beginning that this probably wasn't a proper place. I mean, this was back in 1910, 11, 12, up through 1920 it was open. And it was very difficult to ship things in, although they had the railroad track at that time. I think a lot of that was for coal and iron ore and stuff like that. And so after they started manufacturing these trucks, and as they grew, they knew they had to have another manufacturing plant. So they looked for a property, and they found some down in Philadelphia. It's called, they call it Holmesburg in Philadelphia. I looked up that, I tried to find that on the map, and I see a Holmes that's inside of Philadelphia. So they may have changed it at that time. And as I was looking through some of the stuff, there's history in here, so if anybody wants to look through here, and the one upstairs, they're in the industrial room. There's a drawer up there, and it said about the Bessemer Motor Truck Company and McKay Carriage Book. So if anybody wants to do any research or see anything, you can go upstairs and look through there. But as I was looking through it, of course they had distributors. As they progressed along the way, they had people across the country to distribute it. They would sell it to them, and they would distribute it across the country. And in 1913, there was a firm in Chicago that ordered 10 trucks. And then I see at the World War I, when it broke out, evidently in 1914, I saw between the British, the French, and the Russians, there was an order put in for 470 trucks. They wanted 30 within a few weeks, and then gave them time to do that. In 1915, the French ordered 50 trucks from them. In 1916, there were 175. A distributor in Buffalo, New York, ordered 175. I didn't find anywhere how many trucks were finally made in Grove City or by the Bessemer Truck Company. And I don't know that all of these were made and shipped, but that's the orders I found in there. I'm just trying to look through here. Pretty much. Yeah, unless you have any question on it. That's pretty much what I have on the company. Like I said, they shipped to Belgium, they shipped to Australia, so it was worldwide. And it was amazing, like I said, I had never heard of it. I don't know how many people heard of the Bessemer Motor Company. But again, I'll leave it up here. You can look at some of the pictures through here. There was a man stopped, I don't know how long, 7, 8 years ago in here, and heard that he found a truck, I think it was in Maryland. He's down in eastern PA. And he found one of the Bessemer trucks down there, and he wanted to put it back together. And he had heard that the Historical Society had some pictures of it. So he stopped in, and he looked at those, and he was very pleased because he found one where he could take a picture of like the undercarriage. He said it, and that showed him how to build part of the things back that he wanted to build. And Lori was in touch with him, and somewhere else down in Pennsylvania. I think
the Boyertown Museum was interested in what we have. They have all vehicles manufactured in Pennsylvania. So they were interested, and I sent them a big file. And then Jeff Rouse is the one that tuned us into the truck in Australia that had been used during World War I. And it's in a museum there, and it still runs. They've not restored it, but it does still run. And then there's a series of trading cards for the truck drivers who go in and have their trucks weighed on the big scales. They're called CAT scales, that's the name of the company. And they issue trading cards to the truck drivers that come in. And I found online that one of those trading cards highlighted a Bessemer Motor Truck Company truck, and it was located out in Iowa. And I was in touch with those folks out there, I don't know how many times, and nobody would ever answer me. And finally, last year, just before Christmas, I got a call from the man, and he said, I hear you're interested in the Bessemer truck. And it was wonderful talking with him, and I thought he'd send me pictures, but I think there's pictures of it in here. And he found his in a barn in Minnesota, I think it is. And he was all excited about buying this truck, and he went up to get it, and it was parts inside this barn, and so he had to completely restore it. And I was
interested because when he restored it, he put on it he has the Butler Beef and Provision Company on it. This is a picture of it. You'll have to look at it, but he's closed his museum, and it's in another museum in the Midwest. So, but he said he just made that up, and I said, well, that's strange because we did have a Butler Beef and Provision Company in Butler, PA. So I kind of question whether he really made it up or not. But it's been fascinating doing that research. So, and I'm not into old vehicles, but having those manufactured in Grove City was pretty interesting to me.
But the company lasted until 1923, and it merged with the American Motors Corporation of New Jersey. That year, less than a year later, it merged with Amalgamated Motors. And they were still being made under the Bessemer name in New Jersey in 1926. And I think that's when the last of the Bessemer trucks were made at that time and shipped. The McKay Carriage Works, I think they started in business somewhere around 1886.
Yeah, they started out by Pardo, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think that's where they started.
And then they had a company in Grove City. And then later the name was changed to McKay Body Works. And they made a lot of the Bessemers would make the motor and the wheels and everything and the carriage. And then sometimes they put on the rest of it. But McKay Body Works did a lot of that after the trucks were made. Somebody would say, I want a milk truck, they would build then the rest of that thing from whatever specifications somebody wanted, or a dump truck, whatever they wanted. They would change things out. So there was two companies involved in that.
Someday I want to do a presentation on this, but just haven't got to it yet. Someday we'll have a seminar on just that.
Just that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those two companies. Okay, Tom, I think you're up next.
Yes, John. Will I move this?
Okay, I'll put this back here.
Going into his shop when we first came in. No, it was his father's shop.
Thanks for setting up the chairs.
Everybody having fun? You're not dragging it out too long, are we? We can take a little bit more? Well, not yet, John. We got, some of you may already know, but we have kind of a surprise for you tonight. And it comes from our family history, and my father had Arthur Armour hammered aluminum business, and he made lots of products. These are a lot of the designs that are on the products, but once in a while there was a request for a special commission, and he made things like outlines of family 5 feet tall. It was on a building over in Youngstown, Family Center. And Signs of the Apostles is in Methodist Church in Greenville, along the railing, and every apostle had a symbol. He made that. And then he got a commission from architect friend that he went to school with. In my father's history, he went to Carnegie Tech, trained as an architect, graduated in approximately 31, and there were no jobs. And that's when, with his artistic talent, he was able to get a job with Wendell August. And he was the designer with Wendell August. There was a little conflict because Wendell August had just moved to Grove City, and the artist was McCausland, and they just didn't quite click, so he was let go. My father was let go, and he said he was never exposed to aluminum before this. Of course, it was a brand new thing in the country. and he said, well, I can do it too. So he started his own business, did his own thing, never paid any attention to Wendell August, and I've never had been in Wendell August until 1992. And so, in the course of researching his business, which closed in 1976, one of the things he told me, he had a special commission to make an emblem for the Stag and Doe restaurant in Sharon. And so I didn't know what exactly it was. He said it was pretty big, and he made it. I said, what happened to the Stag and Doe restaurant? Well, it was torn down, redevelopment, it was gone. So over the course of time, I decided I'd find out from Wendell August some things about aluminum industry. Went to see Bill Connect, and we're sitting in his office, and we talked, and then he said, you know, I just found an item that I really think is nice. It's the best thing I've seen. It's made out of aluminum and related to the craftsmen and such. And so we went out to the hallway. Up there on the wall was this Stag and Doe. And he said, I don't know who made it, but I really liked it, and he bought it. And so I said, well, I can tell you who made it. Because a lot of the things from it came from the shop. We still have some of the things. So took a Polaroid picture, took it to my father, and showed it to him, and he said, just like Skip found out, yep, I made that. So there he is with the Stag and Doe.
Wow.
And the reason it's at our house is that my daughter was getting married, Marsha. And
1992.
I decided that I would ask Bill Connect if he would loan it to us to use in her wedding, which was held here in Grove City. And he said, yes, he would, and that's what we did. And it was behind the head table at the reception. And so this is kind of the record of the wedding and the head table. And so that went fine. And over the course of time, there were aluminum shows where people would come together, dealers, collectors. This was out in eastern Pennsylvania. And we would exchange ideas and things. Different people would talk. And I was telling my dad, you know, there's a plate. Looks an awful lot like the Stag and Doe, or the Stag. Well, this is Kensington ware. And Kensington had a design on one plate was the Stag. And their emblem was a stag just ahead. But he didn't know anything about this. But he made this design. He couldn't really describe it. I never found any drawings or anything. So that's what put me on the search, and we used it. And it was at Wendell August, and he owned it. That's where it was. But then, come 2010, there was a tragic fire. Wendell August burned. And I was home at the time, or actually in the shop, my father's shop, which we still own. And I went over to Wendell August, and sure enough, it was burning. It was really burning. And I knew where the Stag and Doe was, but aren't they taking anything out? They didn't take much out. Everybody was trying to get enough water to put out the fire. But it slowly moved to the office, and they got enough water, they put it out, and then there was some valuables in that office. And so they brought in a large excavator, and they pulled down the walls because they wanted to get the safe. And as this was working, I knew that Stag and Doe was right there when he was pulling up the stuff. And I spotted it down in the rubble, and I told the operator, stop, don't go there. Joe Bigley, he scolded me for doing it. Don't do that again. But anyway.
I think you ran up to the excavator.
And anyway, we pulled it out, fireman pulled it out, wherever he is, here's the fireman. He pulled it out, and so I went to Bill Connect. Bill Connect had died at this point. And so I said, you know, my father made this, would you let me take it home and I'll restore it sometime. But this is what it looked like. It was at our house, and it was all sooty, but it had a big scrape across the top, and so that had to be worked on. And so I diligently worked at it. Had to take everything off because it's an applique. The aluminum was put on top of the aluminum, and so I put it back together on our dining room table. Lois didn't notice that. We got it back together, and one of the mysteries was how he put it on and not be able to see the rivets. And with a little experimentation, I figured that out, how he did that. And so the Stag and Doe went from this to, let's bring it out here.
It'll be interesting to see it.
Oh my goodness. You want it on the table?
Well, you
Or
might hold
just-
it up for a minute.
Okay.
So this is what he did.
Oh my goodness.
So it's 4 feet across, both directions. And it was made, and it was in the Stag and Doe, and then it went through the history that I told you about. So then, we went back to Wendell August, and now it's under operation with the CEO, Christian Warner, and this summer my granddaughter was getting married, and I asked Christian if we could borrow it. He said, yes, you can borrow it for the wedding.
Which was Saturday.
Which was just Saturday.
A week ago
A
Saturday.
week ago
Oh my
Saturday.
gosh.
And it was behind the head table there.
That's beautiful.
And I'll pass this picture around.
Can we set it back down? I
Yes.
don't want it to tumble.
This is from the wedding, and it was behind the head table.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the story of the Stag and Doe, but then there's another chapter in this story, and that's where Skip comes in. Skip, where's Skip hiding? There she is. Well, Skip has a certain knack of doing really great things for the Historical Society, and she had gotten a baptismal that was made by Clayton Sheasley. He was another crafter, and it ended up to Wendell August because they didn't want it anymore, and they gave it to Wendell August, where they thought it was made, but they didn't know. But in the course of studying, Skip found that it was Clayton Sheasley had made it, and it was for the church, St. Peter's Church, Episcopal Church in Slippery Rock.
Catholic,
Yeah.
Catholic church.
Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So she went to Bill Connect and worked on him to get it back to the church. And it worked. They did. They gave it back. So now she says, maybe the Stag and Doe needs to be a historical society. So she went to Christian Warner. He said, I have something to ask you. And Christian said, well, what do you want? What do you need? What do you want to ask me? He said, I want you to give the Stag and Doe to the Historical Society. And immediately he said, when do you want to pick it up? And she had 10 arguments why she never had to use one of them. So we now are in possession of the Stag and Doe. And it'll be up on the wall in the entranceway or in the lobby now. When you come in, you'll see it hanging on the wall. So it's really a nice addition to the Historical Society. And how many of you knew about it before you came tonight? Just a couple. Yeah. So it's kind of a hidden secret. And so we toted it to the wedding and brought it back, and it was a success there. The wedding was a success. And it's with the Historical Society. So thanks, Skip, for her diligent work and kind of my persistence with that big excavator. I preserved it through that, so it's come around back to a place that can be preserved for a long time. And yes, Skip?
Well, this has spurred us. This winter, when we're shut down, we have hired a woman who is going to come in, and we're going to completely redo these 2 rooms. She's going to repaint this room and this room, and we've gotten a lot of local paintings, and we're going to redo. And that is what has spurred us on, because we have to find a spot to show that.
So we're thinking about having it in this room instead?
No.
No, it's going to be up. So it's going to be fixed up in the lobby and this room.
I'm working on that.
You're working on it.
I have an idea.
Okay. So, and currently we received a grant from the Pennsylvania Historic Commission to preserve some of my father's original drawings, all the ones that we have, and other documents related to his business. I did probably 60 or 70 interviews of various places, audio and video, and they're all digitized now. That was part of the grant. And there's a lot of other invoices and records. It's not a lot, but it's some that tells the story, and we're slowly getting it together. So that's the story of the Stag and Doe.
Thank you, Tom.
Beautiful.
That's wonderful. And thank you, Skip. You're doing your magic. Well, it's 10 to 8 and 5 to 8, and this is, we don't usually go this long, so everybody's probably glazed over by now. There was one more presentation, but I think if you all enjoyed this tonight, we'll do this again in the spring, and I'll just hold mine till then. So then we can wrap it up for tonight. I do want to, we have refreshments out in the front lobby, so you can be sure to get some of those. But I just want to thank you again for coming.